Hi everybody and welcome to another edition of Liam's Hockey, brought to you by Hosie and Brown Automotive, our title sponsor for this little video hit that I do, trying to do weekly here and roll out my thoughts on the world of hockey, pretty much primarily the National Hockey League, but we've got the Olympics right around the corner. If COVID doesn't get in the way, NHL teams continue to struggle with either personnel or now the latest, as we all know, the Islanders having games postponed, and so it continues to be a problem in the NHL, but certainly hasn't forced a shutdown yet, thank God, and hopefully the Olympics will be able to go ahead. As for today, first of all, little housekeeping for those of you, and we thank you, who have been following myself and Paul Cuthbert on Sticks and Taps. We will resume next week. Paul is on a little bit of a holiday with the family. He is down attending his younger brother's wedding. How about that? I believe getting married this Saturday. So we took a break this week on Sticks and Taps, and we'll be back next week. Really just a couple things I'm going to talk about today. Largely the Montreal Canadiens haven't weighed in fully on this, not certainly since the dismissal of Marc Bergevin, Trevor Timmons, and I believe a PR guy, Paul Wilson, I think his name was. I don't believe I ever met him. I don't think I got to know him. I've met so many of the staff over the years there, but I didn't get to know him. Trevor Timmons I've known for a long time. We have a good background connection through many of his minor hockey teammates that he played with growing up are very dear friends of mine in the Ottawa Valley area here. I believe he's an Arnprior boy, born and raised, I think, or in that area. And Marc Bergevin, I never interviewed, so I don't know the man, but I certainly think he did a good job as general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. I wouldn't go so far as to say great, but good to very good. So where would that be? Middle of the road to, on a scale, say, a 1 to 5. If 1 was absolutely excellent, got a Stanley Cup. 2, he went to a final, albeit with some extenuating circumstances, but they still, at the end of the day, won 3 series to get there, and made a semifinal in his tenure as well, where Chris Kreider ran over Carey Price in Game 1 against the Rangers, and who knows? Maybe that was the year that they could have made some damage, or at the very least maybe possibly got to another final. Perhaps the Rangers may have still won the series. We don't know. But at the very least, Carey was knocked out of the series. And if there was a shortcoming in hindsight of Mark's 9.5-year tenure, I think one of the things when he sits down in 6 months or 6 years from now, he probably will surface with another team somewhere. But if he ever chooses to write any memoirs or discuss anything at length about his time in Montreal, I think he may go to the point that he wasn't able to secure a number 1 center. And I think part of that was because Alex Galchenyuk didn't develop beyond those first few years that they had hoped or expected for a variety of reasons. I think there were some tangible and some intangible reasons for that, but as a general manager, you have to make that assessment when maybe that's not going to work and you need to find somebody to come in. And he may have ended up getting that guy in Nick Suzuki. We'll know more down the road as Nick gets a few rings of tenure on his resume here, but he's still very young, and the whole team is in a bit of a shambles right now, so I'm not holding anybody necessarily accountable in terms of their play on the ice. It's all going to improve. But for now, I'll deal with that in a second. But for now, talking about Marc Bergevin, 9.5 years. He made 64 trades. So that's not including free agent signings, or waiver pickups. Guys like Paul Byron, one of the better waiver pickups in the last 15 years in the NHL. Free agent signings like Tyler Toffoli, or as I said, 64 trades, the overwhelming majority where he did extremely well on. The overwhelming majority. Shortcomings, as I said, maybe not defining or able to locate or procure in some way, shape, or form a number 1 center. Mold somebody, whether it's somebody you've got or picking up somebody to be able to come in and play with whomever you had dictated were your top wingers at the time. In those days, Max Pacioretty, and not really be able to get enough out of it to advance successfully down the playoff trail. It's a tough trophy to win. 9 seasons, basically. That's 6 teams have won the Cup. in those 9 years that Marc was general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. 14 teams went to a Stanley Cup final, including the Montreal Canadiens during the 9 years, 9 full seasons that Marc was a general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. As I said, 64 trades. Like, his body of work statistically compared to the majority of other GMs. In fact, the Montreal Canadiens in Marc's tenure are 10th in playoff wins. In the 9 years he was general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. That's including several years where they didn't even make the playoffs. So they had some runs. They won some series. They lost a lot in the second round. And as we all know, made the final and a semifinal in there. So, you know, when you look at, for example, teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who haven't had a playoff series win in 17 years, it's incredible stuff. And Marc's taking a lot of heat right now from a lot of people who wanted him gone. Look, when he blew the Radulov situation, that to me was a massive red flag, and where I thought maybe they could have said, hey, you know what? Shorter term in Montreal is probably better anyway as a general manager. I mean, it is one of the toughest jobs to do. Run the Montreal Canadiens. I'm talking about it all of sports, let alone just hockey. And he blew the Radulov situation. And not to say Radulov was any type of rubber stamp to get us to a final or win a cup, but he made such a fantastic move picking him up. Nobody wanted him. And he comes to Montreal. It's the same thing with Kovalchuk. Nobody wanted this guy. And you look at the year had, and they both left for greener pastures. Pastures that Montreal was not willing to match, albeit they were. And Radulov, at the 11th hour, and it was too late. He had committed to Dallas. But that to me was a red flag. And the first sort of stumbling block or red flag that things maybe were going awry with him as a general manager. Look, at every general manager is going to make mistakes. I mean, whether he won the Stanley Cup. I mean, Ray Shero looked like he was the next coming of, I mean, his dad was never really a GM, but looked like he was the next coming of whomever you want to say. When he was running those Pittsburgh Penguin teams in the mid-2000s, including going to 2 finals and winning a cup, and all of a sudden, boom, gone, you know? And he goes to New Jersey. What the hell did he do there? And I think the world of Ray, but it's just such a tough trophy to win. And the noise, which is social media, is such a cesspool. It is such a hindrance. It's an anchor around every player, every manager, every coach, and every team's neck. The volume of noise, because it's impossible to ignore or turn off fully. Whether it's people using burner accounts or whatever. I'm not just talking Twitter, but primarily Twitter. And it is just a volume and level of noise that will eat your head. And I really, really believe, Brad Marchand said this last week, that the Canadian teams in particular have a tougher road to hoe because of their fan bases. And I really believe that. I mean, every fan base is filled with idiots and morons that now, courtesy of a phone, can communicate in the blink of an eye and show that they're idiots and morons. Never was that way. You turn the clock back, you either went to your watering hole after you punched your clock in and punched your clock out, and you had a couple of beers and you cried in your beer about your team's lack of whatever to maybe 2 or 3 friends, if that, at the bar. Maybe in a social setting on the weekend, you had another 8 or 10 friends. And that would be it. Or if you had the gumption, you'd write a letter to the editor and send it into your paper. That's if you weren't living in one of the thousands of rural hamlets that really weren't serviced by any type of major daily publication. Then in the 70s, when things came along and talk radio came along, maybe your station would siphon off a bit of time and you could call into a host who 23 hours a day was talking politics or something non-sports, definitely non-hockey related, and you could air your grievance that way. And then talk radio came along, and before all the texting and your comments could be just read, you had to actually phone in to offer up your complaints. And a lot of people don't even want to do that. They don't want their voice on the air. They don't want to have a confrontation in any way, shape, or form. They just want to hide behind their keyboard, be their brave little souls here, and cause the havoc that they do. And this is such a significant part of what's gone on in the sports world today. I digress. Back to the Canadiens. Back to Marc Bergevin. No problem with the dismissal. Everybody can offer up their thoughts. Good, bad, or indifferent, right or wrong. Whatever your thought of is right or wrong. Or mine. Bottom line is, one guy had to answer, and that's Jeff Molson, and he made the call. And he's taken a lot of heat too, right? Too soon, too early. I mean, the draft pick, Logan Mailloux, the Habs have been railed for that. It's funny, Carolina took all that heat for signing DeAngelo because of his idiocy on Twitter last year, and the Rangers let him go, and he goes to Carolina. And they are minimally probably going to the third round this year. Minimally. They are a hell of a club. And DeAngelo has stepped in for Dougie Hamilton, and it really truly is a case of Dougie Who. And you want to see where that's going to make a difference. Watch the playoffs. Because he's going to be twice the playoff performer, in my opinion, that Dougie Hamilton has been to date. Whether Dougie gets in the playoffs again remains to be seen. New Jersey's moving in the right direction, but it's tough, man. It's tough. In the Atlantic's a gong show right now, and they're in the Metro, but it's tough there too. So, Marc Bergevin's tenure in Montreal, to me, was good to very good. And I think the stats back that up. I think his failures not to identify a number one center when it was necessary. Probably he needed to make some changes in the development of the players. Whose ever ideology it has been for 10 to 15 to 20 years, basically in the 2000s, maybe even beyond, for the Montreal Canadiens in their development of their players is been a huge shortcoming as well. Look, I'm not saying anything most people don't know or aren't aware of. This has been known stuff, and it's a shortcoming on the Habs, and it extends through to tonight. I'm taping this on a Thursday, December 2nd. The Habs play tonight. They had their lineup from practice from their morning skate today, and got Cole Caulfield showing at this point right now on the fourth line. I mean, these things are all subject to change. It's when you've lost $1 billion in a row and you're languishing down in the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the league, you're an afterthought. You're an absolute afterthought, and I just don't think that that you're gonna see any sympathy for the Canadiens, even from their own fans. And the next axe to fall is going to be probably on Coach Ducharme, who I think has just been caught up in all this as well. I do not think this is a dumb man. I do not think this is a bad coach. I don't think it was simply smoke and mirrors last year. Yeah, they got on a run. I mean, when they won Game 5 in overtime, the Suzuki Caulfield 2-0, which was brilliant. I think it was a giveaway by Marner at the blue line. And Montreal won game 5. Man, you just had a feeling. You had a feeling it was going to be same old with the Leafs, and they just collapsed like an accordion. And at that point, the Canadiens took off. And boy, they benefited from every break in the book, right? Tavares gets hurt first shift. Scheifele gets suspended at the end of Game 1, which the Habs are going to win anyway. Even with Scheifele in the lineup, they had that game in hand before he steamrolled Evans and got the suspension. And then Winnipeg imploded. And then they lost Game 1 to Vegas. Marc-Andre Fleury handles a puck like a grenade in Game 2. Habs tie it, win in overtime, and they go on from there and win 4 of the next 5, win that series. And really they got outclassed by Tampa, but, they won Game 4 in overtime, and they lost Game 5, 1-0 in a pretty evenly contested match. But Tampa were by far the better team. They could play that series 10 times, and Tampa's going to win it 10 times. And that's why Tampa is hanging around and looking available right now, even with Kucherov and Point out of the lineup. So Bergevin gets let go. Trevor Timmons, that's, again, a shortfalling, I think, of Bergevin as well, was maybe not to address player development. And it's so easy to sit here now in hindsight 2020 and look back and say that at the time. You're drafting these guys, you're bringing these guys up, and whoever is coaching. And Claude Julien, who was there so long during Marc's tenure, he's just known as a veteran type of coach, a guy who favors the veterans, a guy who will, he'll just defense to the wall to just anything, just get the 2 points at the expense of any creativity, any gamble. Just batten down the hatches, circle the wagons, get the 2 points, and move on. And that's a great mentality, because you got to make the playoffs. You got to get to the dance to have a chance to bring home the prom queen, right? But if you're not at the dance, you got no shot at that. But at the end of the day, in the big picture, I think you have to have a coach that's got some fire in the belly, have some foresight, has some vision, can think a little quicker on his feet in the 2000s than the guys who came up old school. And I think Ducharme is showing, even as a younger man, compared to Julian, not a lot, but he is, and a guy who's maybe should have been more in tune. You know, he's still the head coach of the Habs. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think he's probably going to go next. He's showing that maybe he's got that old school mentality as well. And what he doesn't have is definitely, there's just no passion behind that bench. I mean, I'm sorry. I know Rod Brind'Amour got a $20,000 fine for his antics last week in that Washington game. Look, they deserved both those penalties. Most of you probably didn't see it. The Caps got a 5-on-3 late in the game, and they scored the winner right actually at the end of both those penalties, if I'm not mistaken. I think they had both just dead. They killed off the 5-on-3, and it was right at or near the end of the 5-on-4 when Washington made it, got the winner, and I think they scored an empty netter. Rod was ballistic behind the net. I don't know what he was saying, but he got a $20,000 fine. But he's always emotional. I'm not saying every coach has to be that way, but you've got to show something. Your players, this is the 2000s. You're not coaching Jean Beliveau here, and Henri Richard, and Yvan Cournoyer, and Teddy Harris, and all these vets, J.C. Tremblay, these guys like Montreal Canadiens. I mean, you could go in the dressing room and say this, and those guys were going to go out and execute this. They may not win the game, but they would execute that. Today, you can't do that. You have to have some emotion, have to have some passion mixed in with your knowledge. And you have to be, you're as much a teacher as you are a coach, as you are a therapist. You've got to be everything rolled into one to be successful today, I think. You're going to say, okay, I think you saw that. When Craig Berube took over from Mike Dion in St. Louis, he brought a little bit of fire. How could he not? I mean, look at the way he played. And I don't care, you don't have to be an enforcer, but look at the way he played. You'd say, well, what about Barry Trotz in Washington? Yeah, but Barry Trotz has so much knowledge, so much ability, so much respect, such a tenure as a coach where he's been successful really everywhere, all the way through. Now, is he a door slammer and a trunk slammer and breaking sticks and stuff? No. But he gets his point across when he's behind the bench. I just don't see any of that in Ducharme. Nothing. John Cooper lets you know when he's upset about something. You know he's upset. Even with the masks. They're not wearing them in the States anyway, so you can still see it. But you know when John Cooper is upset. Just don't see that with Ducharme. The camera goes back there, and I feel like I'm looking at Jacques Martin again, who's maybe arguably the greatest X and O guy in the last 30 years in the NHL. He's got Stanley Cup rings as an assistant coach in Pittsburgh. He'll never win the Cup as a head coach, I don't believe. And he got picked by Wayne Gretzky to help with a number of Team Canadas, and he got gold medals. Why? Because there's probably nobody on a board better than Jacques Martin. There's nobody you could take a group of guys and go out, run a practice, and get people to run drills and understand that's how they have to play tonight to get the victory than Jacques Martin. But he's got zero passion, and when it was needed here in Ottawa, when those tumblers had to turn, when you had a team of racehorses here that minimally should have gotten to at least 2 finals, if not 3, in his tenure, and at least 1 Stanley Cup. They got none of that in the 8 years he was here, other than year after year after year, losing to Pat Quinn and the Leafs. Switch those coaches, Ottawa wins the Stanley Cup. And I like Jock. I've known him a long time. I'm not sitting here pounding him in the head. I'm just saying, look, I'm trying to say what the Montreal Canadiens need. And I don't think Ducharme's a guy. And I don't think Marc Bergevin was a guy either. Look, he was lame duck. He had no contract. We don't know. It's all speculation. Who had the offer? Was he offered the extension? Or did he go to Molson and ask for an extension last year and then into this season? Was it 2 years? Was it 3 years? Look at his press conference that he gave the first month in after they lost their first 19 games in a row or whatever it was. And he does a press conference and he was asked about it. He said, look, in an ideal world, I'd like to be the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. So what was that? So that means that between him and Molson, they obviously couldn't get an agreement. So why? Term and money, clearly, had to be. And here we are, where they're languishing, they're brutal, they're losing everything. He has no contract beyond this year. You have to show something, so the owner finally stepped up. I got no problem with the timing. I think his allegiance and loyalty to Marc, to a fault maybe, you want to say, and I'm not trying to be a 20/20 hindsight guy here, but I'm going to tell you right now. You want to say that? No problem. Say it. I got no problem with agreeing with you there. But I don't blame him. As an owner, you probably want to say, well, God, we just went to the final. If you're going to wait to see, say, okay, like, I don't expect maybe another trip back to the final. Understand extenuating circumstances. Decimated. Decimated by injuries. Decimated by mental illness. Nobody saw what was happening to Carey happening. Nobody saw that coming. Decimated by players leaving on their own accord or you let them go. And you've got a brand new lineup. Brand new lineup in Montreal. And that idiot, moronic Twitter sphere of Habs fans that think they should just have been able to rubber stamp their way automatically to a playoff spot. I know I'm throwing a lot of people under the bus here because that's not, I think a lot of people were where I was thinking that they'd be maybe in a hunt for fourth in the Atlantic and certainly a contender for the wild card all day. So, yeah, they're way worse than that, and nobody really saw that coming. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But once Carey and Shea went out, and then Byron and Edmondson, and then Tatar was gone, and Corey Perry was gone, and the whole team just started struggling, and then they don't match Kotkaniemi, and Danault goes, and they don't match that contract. I mean, had Bergevin matched those deals, either Danault's to LA or Kotkaniemi to Carolina, the Hab fan world would have gone nuts. They would have gone nuts. As it is, I mean, Carolina's going to, and KK starting to score a little bit. I wish him nothing but the best, man. He got eaten alive here by mishandled in terms of his development, and then the ridiculous expectations, the comparisons to Tkachuk, eaten alive despite having a decent playoff when he got in the lineup, and now he's starting to score a little bit in Carolina. I know they've lost like 3 out of their last 5 or something, but they're a hell of a team. They're a hell of a team, and they're going to be a tougher route this year than they have been in any other year in the Rod Brindamore time period, in my opinion. So we will see. And you look at what's going on. I mean, they had a kind of a tumultuous break with Ron Francis. They flipped their goaltenders totally. I mean, it's not like they've sat pat and just, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And they made some key changes to their personnel. And the Montreal Canadiens have been more or less the definition of insanity. And I'm going to finish on this point where everybody is missing a massive. Jeff Petri should not be playing. He should not be dressing for Montreal Canadiens games right now. This guy, for about half of the season last year, was in the Norris conversation. He can't carry a pail of water right now, let alone puck up the ice. He can't make 2 passes to save his life. He can't get a shot through from the point. His head is not on the ice in these games. Yeah, he's out there physically going through the motions. He is costing Montreal right now plus or minus 2 to 3 goals a game. You cannot tell me, with his relationship with Carey Price and their wives, their closeness, that he has not been more than any other player on that Montreal team. And I'm sure others are in that boat. Guys like Brendan Gallagher, long-term guys that have been with Carey for years. Nobody's been more affected than Jeff Petri. He should not be in the lineup. And the failure to recognize this is just Liam McGuire talking. This is just my opinion as a 50-plus year fan of this organization and a guy who watches every second they play. this has been a massive failure on the organization's part to not recognize this in what is clearly, barring a miracle, a lost year, to not see that you've got a key guy that you are going to need in the next couple of years as you do bounce back. You're going to need closure on Carey Price. Is he going to come back? If and when he does, what's the status of his game? You're going to need closure on Shea Weber. Is he ever going to play again? Is he going through this year? He's not going to retire. You're not filing your papers. He's going to collect that money. Go on long-term injury reserve till the contract's up, man. He's one of 100 guys that has done that in the last 15 years in the NHL. But you need to know what is going on. Is he staying? Is he going to come back at all? He's showing up at games, for God's sake. What if all of a sudden he's skating in February? Does that mean we may see him again? Like, they need closure on that. This is their captain, who played arguably the best hockey defensively anyway and physically of his career. He was better in his younger days offensively, but defensively and physically for Montreal was his best hockey. It matches anything he did for Team Canada or anything he did for Nashville. And Carey Price was fantastic. Other than games 1 and 2 against Tampa, maybe game 2 against Toronto, he played well. He wasn't great. Every other game he played. The first period of the first 5 minutes of game 3 against Tampa. But I mean, the overwhelming majority of games that they played, 21, 22 playoff games? I know. There's Leaf fans out there going, wait a minute. How's that possible? Because we can't get past the first round. They might this year. But that's very early, too, to say. And we'll talk more about that down the road. Anyway, no problem with the dismissal of Marc Bergevin. No problem with the timing of it. And I believe he had a good to a very good tenure. And I think the stats back that up. No problem with the hire. They will not hire Patrick Roy, despite his public request to be considered. I like the thoughts of Darche or Briere or somebody like that, who are both have moved beyond their playing days into various non-playing roles with hockey teams and organizations. And I think it's going to be a francophone man, I think we've been basically told that, who's going to come in, and despite what Jeff Molson said at his press conference, this person will come in and he will work underneath Jeff Gorton. And I believe he'll be shown the ropes by a guy who I think is extremely qualified. He was not let go in New York for hockey reasons. It was all political, him and John Davison both, because of the kerfuffle over Tom Wilson and Arturi Panarin, as we all know. And a good hockey man got let go because of it. Now, the Rangers are rolling right now, too. They look great. Drury inherited a pretty put-together club there, so we'll see how it goes. But that team was put together by Jeff Gorton. And much like Brian Murray put together Anaheim, Brian Burke came in, put his stamp on it when they won that Stanley Cup in 2007. But a lot of that roster was constructed by Brian Murray. Same thing with the Rangers here. And Jeff Gorton, during his brief time in Boston, made some pretty significant moves there as well. Not the least of which was the Tuukka Rask trade and the drafting of Brad Marchand. And I'm not even sure. I think he may have been there for the Zdeno Chara signing as well. I'd have to double check on that one. Anyway, Montreal should not be looking at making any type of major trades here. Every one of these guys can play better. They need a new coach. Ducharme has to go. And I feel bad for Luke. I don't know what the hell Trevor Lukowski's doing. And I feel a little bit bad for Alex Burrows. These guys are new. I feel bad for Luke. He deserves a head coach somewhere. He can't do it there because he can't speak French. And this is probably, my guess is, his last year in Montreal. I kind of hope it is, really. I think his best chance for moving on in the NHL is going to come at another team. Maybe Philadelphia. His heart's in Philly. I'll tell you right now, his heart is in Philly. And this is probably Alain Vignon's last year there. Why not? Why not give Luke a shot? He deserves a chance. And Montreal need another coach. And yeah, so the French thing. Look, I'd love to Montreal to have the ability to hire the best person available. But they play their games in the province of Quebec. They play in the city of Montreal. That's a French-Canadian province. Their number one language is French. All of your dealings with your sponsors and your fan base and your media and everything is primarily French, and English, of course, is a part of it, but it's primarily French. Your key people in your organization need to speak the language with where you live and work. That's just the way it is. And I have no problem with that. Does it make it tougher? Of course it does. You're restricting the pool with which you can obtain the best talent to coach or run your team. But that's the reality of it. You know? It's like getting a scholarship to go play football in Notre Dame. If you don't have one of the highest GPAs in your high school, despite how well you can throw or catch a ball or block or tackle, you ain't going there. And all sorts of people will say, what? They're an independent. They play whatever schedule, the rankings, this, that, and the other. Do you think they care? I think they care. And then forget, I'm not talking about what happened with Brian Kelly here and him leaving and everything. That's a whole other story. But you think they care? Look, there's requirements to get into Notre Dame that are not requirements to get in and go play football in other colleges. There's a requirement to coach and run the Montreal Canadiens. And that's the reality of it. And one is you have to be able to speak French. And that's just the reality of it. So for any of the morons out there that continue to harp on this, like, just give it up. Jesus. Anything you say, or for any of us that are sadly have to digest it, you haven't just scrolled right by it, that's 10 or 30 seconds or 2 minutes of your life you're never going to get back. It's so idiotic. Anyway, this is going to be a down year, thanks, Tips, for the Canadiens de Montréal. Here's my French for you. And I'm okay with that. They were playing hockey on July 7th. Meaningful games. While everybody else other than Tampa was booking their 9th round of the summer. Meaningful games on July 7th. Come on. They're burnt out, man. They're burnt out. They need a break. And now, you know, they've got the Olympic break coming up. So they're going to probably win. Carey's going to come back, I think. And I think he'll play okay. I don't believe he'll go to the Olympics. I don't foresee any 11th hour miracle with Carey in the Olympics. And I think he'll come back. And I think the Habs they'll steal a page from the Ottawa Senators and win a bunch of meaningless games down the stretch. Not a bunch, but enough. And people will just say, and then we'll just steal the Toronto Maple Leaf model. Wait till next year. We'll get them next year. And I think the Canadiens, they've got so many talented guys, and they're going to have, I think, a real good bounce back year. They're going to figure out the Logan Mailloux situation. I think he'll be in camp next year, and he'll say and do all the right things, and time will go on, and he'll be allowed his second chance in life, much like everybody else is allowed a second chance in life, including, for example, say guys like Craig McTavish, who did a whole lot worse than Logan Mailloux, okay, please? And he went on to have a pretty good life. So it's very unfortunate what happened there. And the other thing that should happen there is if a player wants to opt out of a draft, the NHL should respect that and allow that player to not be taken in the draft. But the Canadiens know they were losing Shea Weber. They drafted basically a clone, and possibly in time, although I think there's a 30% chance that young man's career is ruined anyway, which I know is making a lot of you probably very happy. Because the cancel culture society is strong with the force. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very strong. So, I'm going to pour a shot here and do a toast. And before I do that, talk about our Garage of the Week. This show brought to you each and every week by Hosie and Brown Automotive. And what a garage we got to talk about today. Stagra Automotive. 1375 Greeley Lane. Now, if you know the Ottawa area, or the Greeley area, that's the industrial park, Greeley. It runs off a parkway. The old Prescott Highway, as it's known, it's in that development park. In fact, they were one of the first businesses to open in there after being 20 years downtown Ottawa. I believe Bronson and Gladstone was their primary location. They had a couple of others. In fact, they were running 3 at one time. I dropped in to see them. John Stacey. I didn't see Joe Graham. Not sure if he was there or not, but I had a fantastic talk, a lengthy talk with John Stacey. So Stagra Automotive is a combination of Stacey and Graham. Stagra. Isn't that great? And, you know, I've had the good fortune here of doing 14 or 15 garages through the sponsorship here of Hosie and Brown, which I love. And I have had occasion to go in and meet some of these fantastic business owners and garage owners and mechanics. Exceptional mechanics and exceptional people. And I'll put John Stacey right there. I talked with him and heard about an incredible partnership between these two men. I got to digress and just give you a little bit of history about it here. Yeah, they look at Lee, their daughter, John's daughter, gave me the great saying that they had. I love pretty much every garage has a little catchphrase. Theirs is one-stop automotive and light truck repair shop. It's great. Love that. They've got 5 bays. They're bustling with activity. They've got all the top-of-the-line equipment. Everything needed to fix your car. If the wheels roll and there's something wrong with the engine or that's something wrong with that vehicle, bring it there. They'll fix it, get you back on the road. They do all that. But this is different. This is 2 guys who knew each other before they got in business that made sort of a pact that said, hey, if you ever get anything going, John said to Joe, or Joe said to John as well, if you ever get anything going, call me and give me a chance, will you? To let me know if I can jump in with you or vice versa. And they shook on that. And that was the deal they made. And John got something going. And he gave Joe a call, and Joe said, I'm in. And they hooked up. And that was 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And then John proceeds to tell me that they've had one fight in 50 years. One fight. This is beyond. I mean, this is a brotherhood that have, for 50 years, have been churning out repairs for countless thousands of customers. And I want to tell you something else. These guys are also known throughout our community, the region of Ottawa-Carleton, as the hot rod race car specialists. Not only have they built engines, they have raced engines, they have race cars locally, they have race cars internationally, they have driven to races and race. They were part of that fraternity for years. And they have the excellent records and excellent background, I should say, from it for all that time that they spent on it. Some great pictures in the shop as well to look at. That's just another specialty that they have. So you know, if you're popping that 967 Mustang with the big block Cleveland engine or something, and you know you're looking for some extra horse, or you're looking for, you know, maybe you want to go for a rip at Lustville or something, you want to go see Stagra Automotive, man. That's where you want to go. And you know where they get the majority of their parts, and where they told me, and where John told me where he loves dealing? Hosie and Brown Automotive. I mean, that's the beautiful thing that we're doing here through Rod, is talking to all these people and hear all of these garages tell me that, I get parts here, I get parts there, but there's nobody that I deal with like Rod. And John told me that too. So that means a lot to me as well, because I've got a personal relationship. I've known John's daughter, Lee, for a number of years. And she's front and center, man, when you go in there. So this is family, and him and Joe are family. The name is family. Their duration of time that they've been working in our community suggests just longevity and excellence. And, man, it was just a thrill. It was a thrill to be in there. Stagra Automotive, 1375 Greeley Lane, in the business park area. You can't miss it. It's on the right side as soon as you drive down off of Parkway. Piece of cake to find. They're throwing a big party next year to celebrate the 50th anniversary. Want to get through some more COVID stuff. Lee's going to set it all up and organize it. Hopefully, maybe I'll drop by with Rod for a cold one. But I will now sign off on this prolonged show, mostly on the Montreal Canadiens. I'll talk more next time about the other teams. Some great things going on. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Edmonton continues to look good. The Toronto Maple Leafs, credit where it's due, man. Right now, they got their fans in a tizzy. Oh my God. They're so excited to be in first place a month before Christmas. I mean, this is heady stuff. If you're a Leaf fan. I mean, it was 3-1, but we'll leave that for another time. All right. That's it for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Sticks and Taps back next week. Another edition of Liam's Hockey back next week, courtesy of Hosie and Brown Automotive. Everybody stay well. This toast, by the way, in 2 days' time will be the 26th anniversary of the passing of my late father, Noel Patrick McGuire. I won't have done another show between now and then, so I'm going to toast my dad. Everybody be well. Talk to you soon. Stay strong. G'day.